Hey, what is up, mortals? It is Sam Gabriel here, and welcome to What If Deku is in 1B Part 11. Just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back and relax, you're in for a treat, so we begin. The school was kicking straight into high speeds as Izuku surprised his classmates. As preparation for the final exams, 1B had hero training, and it was another hero rescue simulation. A race in Field Gamma where the goal was to save the victim after passing the labyrinth-like maze of factories. When the Greenettes group finished, All Might briefly passed Izuku. He spoke quick words of praise before whispering that they needed to talk later. The time has come where I tell you about me, and one for all. Other surprises came from others, like Awase. The boy, with his usual blue and white checkered bandana, had learnt how to weld items in certain places so that structures could collapse. The class went very well, except for when Tetsu and Bondo had an incident. The class's glue bottle accidentally stuck the silver one to a building. The liquid had been drying to become a ladder so Bondo could scale up the building when the Iron Boy stepped into the sticky substance. With the disadvantage, Tetsu ended up last in his group after yelling at the chimney head. "Wait, you bastard! I won't let you run away!" With a week until final exams, Class 1B decided to study together by getting the top students to teach the rest. They split into 5 groups, with each group focusing on a single subject, so everyone could rotate where they needed to go. The study sessions were extremely effective, and the time flew by. During one of the lunchtimes, Kendo from Class A had told them that the practical part was a fight with entrance exam robots. An upperclassman friend had told the ginger girl, and the group were grateful for the information. She still seemed a little off with Ida's death, but smiled and walked off. 1A had recovered, but it was obvious they were still affected. There was a summer camp afterwards, and no one wanted to attend remedial classes, but after finding out the practical exam news, 1B's focus was spot on as their nerves calmed down. When the 3 days of written exams were upon the students, everyone was ready. "For various reasons, the exam will be different, starting this year," Nezu said, hopping off Power Loader's head and greeting the class. "We'll have you fight in pairs against a teacher." The class became uneasy, which only became worse as Vlad explained that pairs had been decided already. However, the class was ready. Even if this exam was not what they expected, everyone was capable of working together. An example of excellent chemistry was Tokage and Hononuki against Vlad. The overpowered recommendation students won in almost an instant. With the floor softening under Vlad's feet and Tokage taking offense, they cuffed the blood user. The exam also showed improved relationships between students, with an example being Monoma and Shiozaki against ectoplasm. The teachers had decided on the pair to see how far they'd come since the first time they teamed together. Monoma was not hostile to anyone in the class, but it was evident he had a little bit of tension between himself and the Vine Girl. Shiozaki was more open to listening this time around, and everyone was relieved to see both students getting along as they won against ectoplasm by cornering every clone with vines. Some matches were extremely close calls, like Kamakiri and Kurohito against Nezu. The fight was interesting for sure, as the class watched their head teacher laugh from his seat. The mouse-dog-bear-like creature sat in a crane seat and knocked buildings down. "I thought we had to keep damages to a minimum," grumbled Monoma with a sigh. They couldn't complain, since Nezu was pretending to be a villain, though, so the class just watched the destruction. Nezu had cleared the area around Kurohito. With nothing dark to merge with, the boy stood rather helpless in the middle of shiny silver surfaces, but luckily Kamakiri was there to help. The mantis-like boy cut into the edge of a building, sending the thing toppling. "It's going to hit Kurohito!" Awase shouted in concern, but they had nothing to fear. As the building fell close, a big enough shadow was made for the boy to merge into, and Vanta Black got out of the situation. Staying within the shadows, he ran toward the exit and popped out near the gate. Nezu was about to send a falling building their way when Kamakiri got there first, destroying the structure and sending the rubble to the floor. "The darkness prevails," Kurohito had huffed, the team winning with less than a minute to spare. The last match was Izuku and Kaibara. Vlad's reasoning for the pair was that although Kaibara was one of the class's strongest, the teen was too distant from people, both emotionally and physically. The quiet boy would still choose to work alone, rather than depend on anyone. And so, the boy was paired with someone who was also strong in a match against All Might. Huh? Wait, what? They had about 2 hours to strategize, and the Greenette tried to contain his shock. So, any ideas? Izuku wanted to communicate with Kaibara, who just sat there with his head in his hands. The boy was clearly thinking of an idea, but wasn't saying a word. "Kaibara, we run." He sat up straight and looked over at his pair. Even with those weights, he's still number 1. As calm as ever, Kaibara was stating his words like facts. The boy was blunt but honest. "You've gotten stronger since the internship, but even with my gyrate, it would be illogical to have a head-on fight." Izuku agreed, but he also had a question. How do you plan to stall All Might? He's going to try and stop us from winning too. The constant frown that sat permanently on Kaibara's face straightened out a little as he nodded. The boy had expected Izuku not to even be able to fathom the idea of facing All Might, but this was an improvement, although he was a little skeptical. Can you really face off against your idol? Kaibara asked the class's renowned fanboy. He wanted to make sure his partner knew what he was getting into. Well, knowing you, even though we don't talk, you wouldn't say a plan that doesn't have at least a good chance of winning. The quiet boy wasn't convinced. And what I'm saying is that we don't have a good chance at winning. I don't have a problem with it, but Midoriya, you're facing All Might. Fighting. The greenette gulped as he nodded. But you wouldn't have suggested it if you didn't think I was capable? Although it sounded like a question at the end, Izuku was definitely showing confidence. And in a way, the question was a sign of trust as he knew that Kaibara's intelligence was overlooked heavily. The boy had helped with the analysis during the USJ attack, and no one gave him any credit. His skills were well-rounded and quite high just overall. The class's quiet genius wouldn't have said anything if he hadn't thought it to be possible. But can you really fight All Might? It's obvious that your admiration influences your actions. I mean, even your fighting style imitates him. The usually nonchalant eyes were now dead set, gazing into emerald ones. Can you fight? Izuku knew Kaibara was saying that his admiration for All Might was a shackle. Gran Torino had said the same thing. However, what his partner said got him thinking. My fighting style? He honestly wasn't sure if he could fight All Might. The freckled boy saw the number one hero as almost a god, but at the back of his mind he knew better. All Might was just another human who had weaknesses too. This was something he had to overcome. I know fighting All Might be impossible for me. I don't even want to think about it, but he glared back into Kaibara's eyes, making his intention clear. I want to win. We both have strength and ideas. Surely we can compromise and find a way. Unable to argue with that logic, Kaibara lowered his head slightly. The two finally talked in easier terms. After giving each other tips and hints on how to move ahead, when the match started, they were more than prepared. The second the buzzer went off, Kaibara's feet spun, and the boy darted onto the roof of a building to the far left. Izuku darted to the right, and within a moment, both boys were out of sight. Carolina Smash! The attack blew a path down the road and gave the number one a clear path to see. However, since both kids were out of sight, he didn't know where to look. Instead, he stood there, alert and ready to fight. Suddenly, Kaibara was in the air. The teen was on one side of town, and All Might rushed over in an instant. He was about to knock the student from the air with a false, evil grin when, "Over here!" Turning around, he saw Izuku on the other side of town, and by the time he looked for Kaibara, the human drill had disappeared. With no choice but to pursue the greenette, who was heading for the finish line, All Might punched the air to send himself toward his successor. All Might! Just before he reached Izuku, however, he turns to see that Kaibara had reappeared and was closer to the exit than Izuku was. New Hampshire Smash! The process repeated multiple times as the two jumped out from random locations. Each time they were getting closer and closer to the exit. All Might had no choice but to pursue the visible one, as they would win if he left them alone. With their combined efforts, Kaibara was the one to drag his body through the surprisingly cute gate and secured their win. All Might sighed as he stood back up, steam gently rising from his form. They got me going from one side of town to the other to wear me out, all while they slowly got closer to the exit. Very smart. It was a close call, but with the two passing their practical, Vlad announced that everyone in 1B had passed the final exam. No extra lessons for any of us, Tokage smiled, as everyone chattered in their classroom. Now they had to make sure that they had everything for their week's training camp, as Vlad had given them a list previously. Izuku and only a few others needed to buy some items, so the group of 5 who were still missing items planned a meetup. Kiashi Ward's shopping mall, the wizard girl smiled as Shiozaki nodded. Tetsu cheered along as Reiko Yanagi sighed. The 5 of them went round and round the shopping mall, and Tokage got what she wanted immediately. She started to drift around, and Tetsu joined her loud runaround. Shiozaki was near the rear with Izuku, and Yanagi was as quiet as ever. Eventually, though, the tall, silent girl opened up to Shiozaki, and the two started to talk. It was almost 3, and they wanted a break, so Tokage went to go buy the group some drinks. Yanagi got dragged along as Tetsu and Shiozaki wanted to quickly grab some bug spray. Izuku sat alone with all their shopping on one of the round benches and sighed. Phew, I got everything I needed. He could see groups of 1A students around the mall too, and felt a little lonely as he looked up at the ceiling. God, you UA students are always together with someone. Literally no one else was alone. Feeling an arm rest on his shoulders, Izuku almost yelped as he turned to look at Tomura Shigaraki. The villain's dry fingers brushed against his neck. and the greenette shivered in fear.
Why don't we talk, Izuku Midoriya?
Frozen in fear, Shigaraki had a firm hold of the student's neck. If all 5 fingers made contact with skin, death was guaranteed. Even more, before Shigaraki could be caught, the villain could kill potentially 30 or more people. Ruby eyes that spelt death were hidden behind light blue hair as Shigaraki demanded answers. The leader of the league explained how he had gotten all the fame for Stain killing a UA student. His fame was spread even more when an audio of Stain explaining his motive went flying around the internet. There was no evidence that the audio was real, but it dragged some interesting people in.
I still don't get it.
Shigaraki let out an annoyed huff. He hated how his best recruits had joined him for the vigilante.
Those idiots won't shut up about Stain. Yapping about All Might in front of me. I don't understand.
Izuku could barely squeak as the man-child gripped his neck tighter. All Might? The fingers loosened, and air flowed again.
He was going on and on about keeping the real heroes alive and killing the fake ones. If he gets to kill who he doesn't like, why can't I?
The childish adult continued to have his tantrum as the freckled boy's mind spun. Although he definitely could never understand the methods, the greenette now understood why Stain had called them worth letting live. If you're telling the truth that he admires All Might too, I can understand that, even if I'll never understand him for killing. There was silence, and Izuku panicked as the air became heavy with tension.
I see. All Might.
A strangled laugh escaped the villain's mouth.
All Might is the problem.
The man got up and let go of the greenette's throat.
It's great. I don't have to do anything differently.
He looked over his shoulder with a menacing grin.
If you follow me, I'll get angry.
Just like that, Shigaraki disappeared. His whole appearance was incomprehensible. With the villain's brain focusing like a child having a tantrum, the greenette didn't even want to try and think like him. He wanted answers about All for One, but a voice cut him off. Yes, sir. He's just walking out of the West Wing. Turning his head, he saw Tokage on the phone as she and Yanagi eyed Shigaraki. The class deputy was relaying coordinates, and Izuku realized she was floating a little. Is she tracking him? He waited in silence, and they were reaching Tokage's time limit as she gave more directions. When her time limit passed, she landed on the floor with a sigh. Tokage? Izuku hopped over as Yanagi put down the drinks by their bags. The 3 were then approached by the police. I'm fine, Deku. I just need to regenerate since I just lost 30. The mall was temporarily shut down as Izuku and Tokage were taken to the police station. They gave all the information they could to Mr. Tsukauchi, the League's investigator, including a new location coordinate. The wizard girl had felt her parts being teleported and now knew a random location. The detective thanked them for staying calm under the tense situation, and the 2 were allowed to go home. It was supposed to be a shopping trip, yet somehow ended up with them finding a villain hideout. The term ended, and the day of the summer camp came crashing in. As the students lined up for the bus, Izuku could see that Bakugo was getting along better with his classmates. They hadn't spoken since their fight, but the tension between the 2 classes had gotten better since Monoma wasn't so hostile to the 1A blonde. The 2 classes exchanged a few greetings as Mineta started to perv about the girls when Kendo knocked him out, and Denki dragged his friend into the bus. When they arrived at the resort, the first thing Vlad made everyone do was spar. The wild pussycats and Aizawa were already there, and Izuku wondered where 1A was. However, the thoughts were pushed aside, as 1B trained until they could no longer move, and were glad to see food ready for them. They ate happily after the tiring day, and Izuku looked questioningly at a young boy called Kota. The child, nephew of one of the pussycats, had given him a rough greeting and was now just ignoring his class. Class B got the attention last semester, so I thought I'd push them into a different training. The greenette's ears pricked up as he heard Aizawa talking to Vlad as the 1A homeroom teacher explained how he pushed his students off a cliff and into the beast forest.
I still don't understand your methods. You could just let them spar against my kids.
Aizawa just shrugged.
They need to know how to react to danger like yours do. Only 3 in my class seem to be able to do that.
The tired man looked at his watch and sighed before getting up.
Mine should be here soon. Have yours take the baths first.
Vlad nodded and looked over to see that his class finished eating a while ago and was just talking now.
Okay, kids, go relax or something before you sleep. We're getting up early tomorrow.
The class positively responded before heading to the open baths as Aizawa went to receive his own tired class. The first to make it there was Bakugo, Todoroki, and Uraraka. Class A's tired but happy squeals over food could be heard all the way from the baths as 1B relaxed. When they were done, Izuku went to change, and as he relaxed in the boys' room, a commotion could be heard. Popping his head out through the door, he saw Todoroki carrying Kota and Mineta. Both boys were unconscious. Concerned, Izuku walked over to help take Koda from the bicolored boy's hands. What happened? Todoroki explained how Mineta fell from the wall after trying to peek at the girls, and Koda was the one to stop the pervert. However, the kid accidentally fell off the separation wall too when Todoroki caught him in a wave of ice. The fall must have been a shock, though, and the kid was now out cold. I'll take him to Mandalay if you want, the greenhead offered, as Todoroki nodded gratefully before taking Mineta to the 1A boys' room. Mandalay ended up explaining Koda's rough behavior to the freckled boy, and finding out the truth was hard. Losing parents at a young age was something that could haunt someone forever, and Izuku could only imagine the grief. Mandalay thanked him, and the greenette returns to his room to get a scolding from Monoma for disappearing at night without a warning. The next morning, Kaibara started the chain of contagious yawns as the morning rays peeked over the trees. Develop our quirks? Izuku and his class wobbled after their teacher, who headed into the forest.
Yep. I'm pretty sure Aizawa made 1A wake up earlier, and they're already starting, so let's go.
Tokage's mind finally woke up, and now had questions. Even if you say that we're going to be developing our quirks out of the blue, all 20 of us have different quirks. How are we supposed to know what we're developing and how? Rin nodded his head in agreement. Can you be more specific? Vlad explained the importance of why their quirks themselves needed to improve as he strode through the woods.
Break through your limits.
The class looked over at 1A, who were already screaming from their various exercises. Bakugo's explosions could be seen detonating from over a mountain as they turned their heads to see Koda trying his best to just scream and increase his vocal range. Everyone in 1A was already screeching in pain for overusing their quirks, and 1B sighed as Aizawa walked over. Hell on Earth was just about to start. The Wild Pussycats were perfect for the job, as Ragdoll's quirk, Search, could know all the information of 100 people by just looking at them. Pixie Bob's Earthflow quirk could make their ideal training grounds. Mandalay's telepathy could give multiple people advice at once. And finally, Tiger's Playa Body meant he could put up a tough fight for anyone. As 1B dispersed into their own corner in the boot camp, Izuku found himself destroying his muscle fibers to make them grow back stronger. Every few minutes, Tiger would come to deliver a punch, and the greenette was often thrown into a tree. Gasping for air, the freckled boy lay on the ground after receiving another punch. His mind was filled with everything, from the very beginning to when All Might first offered him the position as his successor, to what happened after hero training class, the explanation on how the quirk was passed around, the reveal on how the quirk came to be, and about All for One, everything from the relationships between everyone and the inevitable fight every successor had to face. Stop it, Izuku. All that matters now is my own hard work. Getting up, he screamed out a battle cry before getting ready to fight against Tiger. Koda stood behind a nearby tree and saw the greenette doing everything he could to be a hero and scoffed with disgust before walking away. The exhausting day ended, and no one wanted to make dinner, but eventually pulled through when multiple stomachs started to rumble. Both classes split up the work and progress was quickly made. Izuku looked around and saw Tokage next to Yanagi as the two were peeling carrots and potatoes opposite Komori. Uraraka and Mina were cheering, and the greenette turned to see Todoroki gently lighting the fireplace with his quirk. So Monoma wasn't wrong. He can use fire. Huh. The curry was made, and everyone ate heartily. The greenette walked out of the bathroom and smiled at the atmosphere. It was light and happy after the exhausting day, when he noticed a figure walking off into the distance. Mandalay's voice could be heard calling, "Koda, where are you? It's time for dinner!" He hasn't eaten? Without hesitation, Izuku went to grab a plate of curry and ran after the young boy's footsteps. After trekking around the back of the forest, he walked up a mountain path and saw the child sitting by the edge of a cliff. You're hungry, aren't you? Koda immediately stood on alert and started to yell, but Izuku paid no heed. I don't need any. I don't want to hang out with you. Get out of my secret hideout. Secret hideout, huh? Looking around, the mountainside was really peaceful, albeit a little lonely. Trying your best to improve your quirk. It's gross. Calling each other stupid names like hero and villain. Just killing each other. Stupid. Izuku couldn't say anything as he realized Koda hated the very concept of quirks itself. The child was yelling at him to go away, and the greenette sadly smiled. As someone who was previously quirkless, the words hurt. Placing the plate onto the floor, the freckled boy turns to walk away. His voice was quiet as he left. If you reject it that much, then it'll only be more painful for you. Koda watched the teen disappear as he muttered, Shut up. The wind and the stars above were all that was left accompanying the child as he looked over the mountainside, unaware of the intruders stepping out of a portal. Thank you all for sticking around, and I hope that you enjoyed. Before you leave, we would just like to let you know that We the Celestials has many other channels for your entertainment and viewing purposes. All the information you'll need is right below here in the description. so feel free to check out all the other incredible projects our team creates. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. That's all for today's video, so goodbye and have a divine day.